I'm Janet Cox. I lead Climate Action California. And we're putting this on this time. This is the umpty-umpth edition of this training that we've been doing for years, and it gets better and a little different every time. This time we are co-sponsoring this with Climate Reality and the and 350 Sacramento, because one of the things that you'll be hearing about is a new project we have to put more effort into engaging with the bill committees in Sacramento. This is really going to be very exciting, and you're going to hear about it soon. Today's presentation is focused on how we as individuals out in the boonies or in Sacramento can make a difference with our legislators and the decisions that they make about the laws that are going to affect all of our lives. So our presenters today are Mary Buxton, who's with Climate Action California, Kathy Schaeffer with Climate Reality Project California Coalition, and Jonathan Cole, who co-leads the transportation team for Climate Action California. It's going to be terrific. And I can't wait to hear what they have to say. So we're going to try to hold questions until the end. Put your questions in the chat, and some of them we'll answer as we go, and others we'll talk about at the end. We're going to definitely have some time for questions when we get through the presentation. And I just want to say welcome and enjoy. And now over to Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Buxton, and I've been with Climate Action California for, I don't know, like 9 years maybe. And I have really enjoyed the time, and I just keep learning, and it really helps me feel like I'm supporting democracy. Next slide, please. So first of all, why lobby? Lobbying can have bad connotations because it's associated with the idea of people buying influence for their cause or their point of view. But as citizens and constituents, lobbying means something a little bit different. We advocate for causes because we believe in them and we want to get really good results for the climate and for the environment. And we really do want to influence votes with our presence and relationships. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And we do need to promote our interests. So it's different than paid for lobbying because we're not paying for it. But I think we, offer, a lot of enthusiasm and belief from our point of view. It's really important to lobby because we want to influence the legislators' vote. We advocate for specific bills, promote interests, core beliefs, and positive changes in our legislation. A lot of times we educate the legislator. There's just this, and I know they've put a limit on the number of bills that can be introduced, but there's still an enormous number of bills, and there's no way each legislator can command, in-depth knowledge of every bill. So we can bring that information to them. And the biggest thing I have to talk about is building a positive relationship with your representative. So let's see, next slide, please. And why is it important to make our case? I already said that the legislator often doesn't know everything, and we are often the expert. Now, I don't want to create any performance anxiety for people about being an expert. When I first started out, and even now, if I'm feeling less secure of the details, I will just do a disclaimer that I'm a citizen lobbyist and apologize in advance if there's anything I'm missing, but this is my best effort here. And the other thing that we do when you work with an organization like this is we always do pre-meetings. And at the pre-meeting, we go over what the agenda is, which is very specific. We identify who's going to talk about what, and that person has a good command of what they want to say. And the rest of us can be there as a face on the Zoom screen. And when a legislator sees 30 plus people at a meeting, I think they pay attention because it shows there's a lot of interest for people to take the time out and show up. And we also want to balance the messaging from professional lobbyists, industry, and political interests. I think sometimes personal stories people have about, about fire devastation like's happened this week, or health issues related to climate impacts, that sticks with people when they think about bills. It's not just an objective topic. So it's really important to make our case. And in making our case, I think it's really good, and working with this organization is it kind of happens because of the structure of the organization. But when you're organized and you're civil and you use the 30 minutes or 20 minutes that they give you wisely, the door's open to working with you again, usually, because you made it easy for them, and you're on task and polite. Next slide, please. So who lobbies and how? So paid lobbyists, and in our case, those are often big oil and gas or Western State Petroleums. Paid lobbyists are paid by a special interest. They bring campaign cash to different representatives, and they communicate a single, clear, objective message. And often their work happens in Sacramento. Citizen lobbyists volunteer. They bring grassroots support. So that's why coalitions, where we work with other organizations who are also working on climate, that's grassroots support and contact with constituents, which is really important. We may have several objectives, although fewer are better. And a lot of times the work of citizen lobbyists goes on in the district. But as the organization has grown, we now have more of a statewide presence. So, and with Zoom, I can participate in meetings in Southern California just to be that extra face on the Zoom screen. And also, every time I attend a meeting, I learn so much, and I feel like I'm learning stuff that is way before the newspapers or the general public would get exposure to this information. So it's kind of exciting. Plus, the other thing that's really fun about it is getting to know the personalities and getting to know the different, representatives and their staff. It's just really interesting and very fun when they recognize who you are when you call again. So we don't have the dollars to give, although this organization did set up a PAC and raise $100,000 last year to use in very creative, funny ways on social media. We bring passion to our cause, and that's the kind of coin of the realm for the citizen activists. Next slide, please. So you can advocate as an individual. The most important thing is to cultivate ongoing relationships with legislators and staff, where you are a trusted resource that if you say, hey, I have a bill idea, they want to hear it because they know you've been, had a lot of integrity and done your homework before. Ways of participating as an individual is you want to go to events that the legislators and the staff provide. So my local assembly person has meetings with her constituents at the local dog parks, and she'll put out a note, bring your dog, we'll talk about legislation at the dog park. That's easy to go to and kind of fun to do. I had one legislator who wanted me to come join the 4th of July parade and walk with them. So if sometimes they have town hall meetings where you can show up in person and you want to let them know you're there to show, just to have a presence. Always in our meetings, we start out with thanking them for their work. It might be legislation, it might be thanking, just thanking them, a staff person for meeting with us multiple times during a session. We can sign petitions, we can make calls and send emails to representatives, write letters to the editor, and join the meetings on Zoom that I've been talking about. So I think there are a lot of ways to work as an individual and amplify what you do to help build relationship. Next slide, please. It's also really important to advocate as part of a group. And we do meet often several times with legislators during the legislative session and even during the summer to talk about bill ideas. But if you're part of a group, you have a bigger voice, and there's just more brain power behind proposing bill ideas, and we have a number of people who have PhDs, very specialist in certain areas that bring a lot to the table. We can draft petitions and speak at bill review hearings. So as part of a group, it's really important to participate as a group member and remember that you're there as part of the group, not to promote your particular individual cause, and to stick with the agenda. So next slide, please. So this, I kind of reference this, guidelines for group work, that you're representing an advocacy group, not yourself. And I've had to go back and before I started working, before Janet came to this group, really, I've had times where people sort of commandeered the meeting to talk about an issue that was important to them. And that's very difficult because you don't get to your whole agenda. And one meeting that I did not attend, people got up middle of the meeting and left, and just polite, participation is really important in our meetings. And it's really good to work in coordination with other climate groups because it makes a really good environment for sort of cross-pollination of ideas and being aware of different facets that may not be obvious to you because of your social and economic status. So we base our collaboration on mutual respect and support. It's very important to include environmental justice groups and their concerns, and even, I even try to elevate those as primary, because they often get ignored and left with the negative consequences of climate change. Agree before the meeting on a consistent message and stick to it during the meeting, and don't contradict each other. So it's just that all adds for really great use of time during a meeting and makes it super positive for everybody. Next slide, please. And as I said again and again, relationships are vital. And it's part of it that I really enjoy about doing this work. And the purpose, though, is to pass important climate legislation now and in the future. And having good relationships ensures future access. This just can't be stressed strongly enough. It allows us our influence over legislation, and when we have good relationships with staff members, they're resources for us and are more open with us. And so just really important for that. Meeting with a staff member can be really useful when the legislator is too busy or got, drawn away, because they often have pretty deep knowledge of bills, and the Capitol staff are often more knowledgeable about specific bills or issues than the district staff. And they can be really good resources and can be effective conduits for your views at their weekly meetings. And although it can be a little bit threatening, don't be afraid to meet with legislators who don't share your views. The level of debate in our country has been kind of plummeted, and it's been replaced by all of this polarization. So this is an opportunity, if you get a chance to have a meeting with someone, a legislator who doesn't particularly hold the same views as you, you're looking for common ground and an opportunity to educate or share a personal experience or anything that can soften the relationship between the two people and their idea sets. So, and be open to that from the other side as well. So with that, I am done, and I will turn the speaking over to Kathy Schaeffer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mary. I'm Kathy Schaeffer. I do legislative work with Climate Action California, as well as Climate Reality Project, the California Coalition, and locally. So my job is to really talk today about the nuts and bolts of how we put together meetings. Mary has, this is true. We can't say it often enough. Meetings help develop relationships. Back in the old days, we used to have in-person meetings, and we would get, together, a group of us, and carpool down to the district office and have a short meeting and go home and feel good about it. And that was the way we did it, and it was great. But and the face-to-face was important. It's really so critical to be able to put a name with a face to solidify that relationship, as Mary talked about, because you will see them in person if you're active at some point. So repeated contact is important, and the benefits of Zoom now that we're in the modern era, it's so much easier and so much, you all know, so much more efficient than driving from place to place for meetings. But the most important thing is that we have been able to improve our reach across the state and not be stuck within our own geographic location. Before we get to our meeting, we want to know about the legislators and their ideas and their interests, and be ready to share our priorities. What are we focusing on? These are more general meetings, kind of a meet and greet type of meeting, and it typically has a larger group. And in these meetings, not everyone will have a chance to speak, but like Mary said, the numbers of participants in the meeting is important. It shows our strength, especially if we can include constituents. If we are supporting specific legislation, we want to target legislators to speak to that is not necessarily out front and open about a yes vote. They're convinced, they like this bill, they're going to vote yes, and we'll say, great, yay, thank you. But we don't want to spend time meeting with that person to try to convince them. This is where constituents are important in a small group. We target the legislator who might be on the fence and need some convincing. So we want to make sure that the people who are in this meeting who are speaking know the bill and can present talking points and arguments in favor. So the players are the legislators, the legislative directors, and the staffers. The legislators, if we're meeting with an assembly member or senator, we will start the conversation, ask some preliminary questions, and then let them talk. They just love talking. And it's fascinating. It's a really interesting process. We can chime in and ask clarifying and follow-up questions and try to expand the conversation and then tie our interests into it. It's a dance. It's a dance. When we meet with the legislative director, it's an easier meeting because that person is generally more accessible and is more in touch with the day-to-day operations and the status of bills. They can give us updates and they can give us information on strategy sometimes, who we should be reaching out to, and some important talking points. The staffer, the person who is staffing the bill, is my most favorite person. The person who is staffing the bill, it's their job. They get a package of bills that they're going to follow, and it is their job to know these bills backwards and forward and be able to interpret them and talk to people about it, like us, who need help with the technical language. These are people who can provide fact sheets. They have to write them and they can provide them. They give us pretty accurate updates on the timing, when a vote might be scheduled, where it stands in committee, and again, how we can help. So I love the staffers. So we need to really be nice to them because they work so hard and it's such a hard job sometimes. We have been experimenting, and Mary touched on this a little bit. We have been experimenting this year on reaching out to legislators who may not disagree with, who may disagree with our opinions on climate and the environment. We've been reaching out to those Republicans or right-leaning Democrats. We want to have those meetings, and we have to temper it by knowing that we may not change minds, but we might have that opportunity to educate them. And a lot of it is us listening to them, to hear their positions and why they're saying what they are, and use that for future strategizing. Next slide, please. When to schedule a meeting. Well, we've been scheduling a lot of meetings lately, and if you haven't been to any, I think you need to sign up. They're really, really fun. Our new legislators are so excited to meet with us, but they're often overwhelmed. We are able to meet with them or their representatives, but they may not know everything we want to talk about. So it's definitely a meet and greet at that point. After they get settled in, we can have more deeper conversations. We want to set up a meeting early in the legislative cycle so that you can kind of set the groundwork and get your message out there and maybe influence someone early on. It's also a good time to ask broad questions and talk about our priorities and what we hope will happen during the session. When you have a specific ask, it's important also to make contact with the ledge director, because the ledge director will definitely convey our support to the member. And Fridays or during a recess is a great time to try to schedule a meeting, because they'll probably be in district. They won't have any committee meetings, and they won't be, running off for floor votes or anything. So Fridays are sometimes a good time, unless they take a 3-day weekend, but it is what it is. Next slide, please. Okay, to make an appointment, we will call the Sacramento office to get information. I apologize, I have to leave some fire alerts on my phone. To make the appointment, we're going to call Sacramento office to get info on how to make an appointment through the scheduler. And it's not in the district office. The district office is where people handle local issues for constituents. If you want to make an appointment, set up a meeting, we need to call the Sacramento office. If you know the ledge director and you can email him or her directly and ask them to facilitate a meeting with the legislator, that would be awesome. You might end up with just the ledge director or other staff member, but that's also fine either way. Most of the time, sorry, I'll take care of this. You'll make contact with the scheduler first, and the scheduler will tell you what to do to schedule a meeting. They all do something a little bit different. They may connect you directly with the ledge director or an aide, or they may ask you to fill out a scheduling form online. They'll want to know who you are, what your group does, what you're affiliated, why you want to schedule a meeting. You might have to be a squeaky wheel. You don't always get a response the first time, but if you follow up with the person you emailed or talked to in the first place, on the second contact, you usually get a response. And once you have a firm date, it's important to figure out your logistics. You're going to set up your Zoom and confirm it, invite your people, schedule a pre-meeting, and of course, give all of this logistical information to the member's office. Next slide, please. Knowing your representative is very important. To know that person's background, who they are, where they're coming from, what their sense of government is. We can get a lot of information by looking at their websites. We look at Ballotpedia. We look at Ledge Info to see what bills they've supported or voted against. And there are also environmental report cards that come out annually from groups like Sierra Club or California Environmental Voters. So we can get lots of information that way. The demographics about the district are usually on the assembly member or senator's website. We can find out about, or you can Wikipedia anything now. So don't be afraid to use it. We want to know socioeconomic levels. We want to know ethnic backgrounds in the district and what type of district it is, whether it's rural or urban or a coastal or inland. And we always try to find out what are the hot button issues in those districts. We look at their legislative record. What kind of bills do they author or co-author? After a while, you get to know. That Senator Becker is about energy. About Assemblymember Zabur talking about wind. About Laura Friedman, I love, who's gone to the Congress, talking about natural resources and animals and really great stuff. And transportation. She's transportation. But you get to know what their topics are that they're good at, that they're experts at. What committees do they sit on? This is really important. As Mary mentioned, the committee chair has a ton of power. So when they get committee chairmanships, they are pretty powerful in the legislature. With that position, they can choose not to hear a bill in a committee, in their committee. They can make amendments. They can show strong support or very weak support for a bill. And that really kind of informs some of the committee member votes at times. Some people don't follow, but it's a huge influence on the committee chair. In the training we did last week, starting off with Janet and Will and Adam, we talked about committees. And Will talked about something new that CAC is going to be trying, which is to recruit volunteers and sign up to follow specific committees and build relationships with those committee members and show up in Sacramento for committee meetings. This is going to make a huge difference. And when we get to Jonathan, and I'm sure Janet will also chime in, he'll give you more details. During COVID, we were able to call into committees with our comments. And it's so sad that, people down here can't drive up to Sacramento to provide comments in committee meetings. So we were dependent on remote testimony. We haven't dropped that ball. We are still working on it because they don't allow call-in testimony anymore. So we're working on that decision, wanting to get it reversed. But for now, until we can get it reversed, we will be there in person, which is why we really need some people to volunteer for committee, going to committees, or we have to write letters. And lastly, who are their influencers or their financial backers? Is it Climate Action California or Climate Reality Project or any other environmental grassroots group? Or are there influencers and backers the Western States Petroleum Association or the trade unions that are so anti-climate at times? We need to develop strategies for dealing with lots of different support and opposition. Next slide, thanks. So meetings don't just happen. It does take quite a bit of thought and organization to have a really successful meeting. It does get easier as you do it. So don't be afraid. You just jump in. If you're ready to set up a meeting with your group, we are happy to help, but go ahead and try it. If you signed up with CAC or Climate Reality, CAC/Climate Reality to attend a meeting with a legislator, you most likely will be asked to attend a pre-meeting. You don't have to if you're an observer, but you are absolutely welcome to attend those pre-meetings. It's part of the process. At the pre-meeting, we will discuss our objectives. What do we want to cover? What are our goals? We'll create or review the agenda. We will develop priorities and key questions, and we'll identify those people who will ask the questions or make comments as time permits. Because we have, did I skip a slide? Uh-oh. Sorry. We want to make sure that we are always moving through the agenda and we limit comments or questions if we're running out of time. But remember that we really have to go with the flow. Our agenda doesn't always go the way it was planned. If the conversation goes in a different direction that's productive, it's great. But we definitely need to balance staying on track and balance the flow with staying on track and covering everything that we need to cover as much as possible. We try not to go down too many rabbit holes. Sometimes we can't control that, so that's fine. Active listeners are important. Just because you aren't a part of the conversation doesn't mean your presence isn't important. We want to show that we are a strong and important group, and just your presence is important. Next slide, please. Okay, and just a few more tips to ensure a successful meeting. To make sure it goes smoothly, we want at the start of the meeting to confirm the time that we have. We want to make sure we don't go overtime. If the legislator chooses to go overtime, that is perfectly fine, and we will go with it. But it's their schedule and not ours. Attendees will introduce themselves again if we have time. If it's a big group, we're not going to do that. We're going to write our name in our Zoom square and our group. If you do have an opportunity to introduce yourself, just be aware of the time again and make sure that you keep your introduction very brief, pretty much just your name and the group that you're representing. The meeting facilitator is going to set the tone and start the conversation. Again, we have an agenda, but we're going to be flexible. And again, we always come back to this. It's about building relationships and maintaining relationships. We're going to be respectful and listen attentively and stay on topic. Staying on topic and sharing the most important information is essential. We always ask how we can support the legislators' goals and specific bills. This may not apply to our meetings with our more conservative friends. Doesn't hurt to ask, though. When we finish, we thank them for their time, and After the meeting, we will be sending a thank you email along with any specific documentation that they asked for during the course of the meeting. They will sometimes use us as resources, and they're not shy about asking for documentation on any ideas we have, which is also really helpful. The best part of these meetings is our debrief. We always try to follow up, and we get together on Zoom, or we stay together on Zoom, and just talk it out. It's great to hear other people's perspectives, what they heard versus what maybe you heard. Just to get a debrief is really interesting. And we can also, once we all kind of chat about it, we can strategize and talk about next steps. So to conclude, I would like to tell you that you must attend your legislator meetings. They are so interesting and you won't regret it. And there's no pressure on you. If you want to be there just to listen and observe, I think it's fantastic. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn this over to Jonathan now.
Thanks, Kathy. So up till now, we've been talking about how you interact with individual legislators. Now we're going to shift the focus and talk about committees, because committees are very important, very powerful in the legislative process. So I want to talk a little bit about what committees do and the role of the committee chair. Next slide, please. So this is just a simple graphic. There's lots of versions of this out there of how a bill becomes law. And when a legislator introduces a bill, it then goes to committee hearings. Actually, first it's read on the floor of whichever house it's introduced in, and then there's a 30-day waiting period. Then it starts going to committees, and the Rules Committee in each of the legislative branches decides which committees have purview over that bill. And the main thing to notice here, don't try to read all the fine print, but just that committee hearings are important. You get a committee hearing in the House where it's introduced. So let's say this was the Senate, then all the light blue would represent what's happening in the Senate, and the dark blue would represent the Assembly. If the bill's introduced in the Assembly, just swap it around. So it goes through hearings from one or more committees, then it goes to the full floor for a vote, and then it goes over to the other house, and the whole thing starts over again. So committees are very important, and it's during that committee process that you get a lot of changes to the bills, quite often amendments. So it's important to keep on top of what's going on with the bill, to be aware of when it's amended. And again, LegInfo, which Adam went through in the last session, is a really powerful tool to help you keep on track with all that. And as Kathy was saying, the committee chair is very powerful in this process. The committee chair can have a strong influence on other folks on the committee. Quite often the chair will talk to the legislator before they bring the bill into committee and say, I think you need to make these amendments. And if those amendments aren't made, it's pretty clear the bill may have trouble getting through that committee. So quite often you hear a legislator come before the committee and start off by saying, I will be accepting the committee's suggested amendments. Or sometimes, occasionally they won't, but usually either they will accept it, or sometimes they just pull the bill altogether rather than accept amendments that they don't approve of. So this really is a significant portion. The committees have a huge amount of power. It's important to keep on top of the committees, and that's why we're launching a new initiative to try to track the committees more closely. Next slide. So these are sort of our target committees. It doesn't mean these are the only committees that we're interested in. It means that these are the ones that most often deal with our issues. And so we want to have folks who focus on this. And this is the new initiative that Will talked about last time, and I will talk about a little bit more as well, that we're wanting to get volunteers to really follow these committees, get to know the committee members, sort of the same things we were talking about in relationships with individual legislators, getting relationships with the members of these key committees that show up. And you can see that in the Senate and the Assembly, there's sort of a parallelism, except for the Senate has natural resources and water, which doesn't really have a parallel committee on the Assembly. But those issues, rather environmental quality, which doesn't have a parallel in the other house. But the environmental quality committee, those issues will be dealt with different committees in the Assembly. So these are the ones we really want to focus on. And Alex, could you put in the chat the links for the Senate and the Assembly committees, as well as the LegInfo link? I think the LegInfo link has already been in there. And again, if you didn't see this Adam's presentation in the first session, go back, look at the video. LegInfo is a really powerful tool for keeping track of where a bill is, what committees it's going to, what the previous votes have been. So it's a really valuable tool. Next slide, please. So this is where we've got our new initiative. We want to get stronger relationships with these committees, and we want to have teams assigned to each committees. The folks who may have a different perspective than us, like the major fossil fuel companies, some of the other lobbies, they have paid lobbyists who are in Sacramento all the time, who are talking to the legislators, who know the committees, who know the key players. We want to have folks who are able to do the same, to get a relationship with the committees. We are looking especially for folks who are within easy distance of Sacramento, who can actually come into Sacramento on a regular basis. And easy distance, that kind of depends on how you define it. Do you feel comfortable physically going to Sacramento? If you're living in Sacramento, that's terrific. Or if you're living near, I'm in San Francisco, but I often take the train into Sacramento for hearings. So it's whatever you think is an easy distance. And the idea is these folks will develop relationships with the chairs of the committees, with some of the consultants that are around that are big major players, especially for some environmental groups. One of the important things you can do is to deliver in-person Me Too's, and we'll talk about what a Me Too is in just a few slides down. The idea is we want to have one person on the team who's going to be a point person who's in direct contact with the legislator and or the legislative director, and really knows them. The reason it's good to have one point person is because if they see the same person consistently, they get a consistent message that builds the relationship. If it's a bunch of different people, if it's somebody different each time, they don't get the same confidence. So this is all, again, about building relationships, which is one of the big themes for today. So that's the basic idea, and we'll get into more about what these teams will do. Not everybody has to be in easy distance to San Francisco. There's a lot of things you can do. We'll talk about written interaction with committees. And so you could be somebody who's working on some of these position letters or other forms of written communication. And Alex, could you also put the sign up? It's in there already. You're ahead of me. So there is a sign-up form. It's really important for us to get a sufficient critical mass of folks who have volunteered to do this. This is going to be really key effort, especially with some important legislation coming down the pipe. Janet, did you want to say anything about the polluter pays legislation that's coming up?
Well, absolutely. It was important before the catastrophes in Los Angeles, but it's more important than ever that we pass major legislation that clarifies who's actually going to pay for the rebuilding and the losses that thousands and thousands of people are feeling in the most vibrant city in California right now. And there was a polluter pays bill last year that didn't make it to a vote. This year, a lot of groups, including Climate Action California, are coming back like gangbusters to try to pass that. And there will be more information about it soon, I hope. we're waiting to hear who the author is going to be, and as soon as that person is on board, there will be a major launch of a campaign that I think is going to carry us through this year and just be, it's just time. And so when we first started talking about this committee project, we had no idea what was going to happen in Los Angeles or how critical this was going to be, but stay tuned for a lot more information about polluter pays, also described as the Climate Superfund bill. One is already passed and been signed in New York and also Vermont. They're on the books in a lot of other places. And there's a federal bill, and we just have to make this happen. So this is going to be a huge push for us. And I think that this committee strategy is going to be key to getting this bill through. So thanks. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Janet. Yeah, so we have this confluence of things. We've got this polluter pays discussion that's going to be coming up. And we know that fossil fuel companies and others, the folks who would have to pay, are going to be doing a full court press. They're going to have all their lobbyists out. So it's important that we have folks who are able to talk to the committees as well on a regular basis. So again, if you are able to participate, especially if you're near Sacramento, but even if you're not, if you're interested in participating in this process, the sign-up form, the link is in the chat. So please think about doing that. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about how we communicate with committees. And there's two main types of communication. There's written communication and there's testimony at hearings. This is where we get the Me Too's that we were talking about before. So we'll talk a little bit more about each of those. Next slide, please. So written communication can be impactful. It's a permanent record. It goes into several records. When the analysts do analysis of bills, they will report these are the groups that are on record with written support. These are the groups that are on record in opposition. So it provides kind of evidence of support or opposition for bills. And these options, we're sort of going from ones that anybody can do down to ones that are more appropriate for organizations like CAC. So you can always just send as an individual an email or a letter to the legislator's website. It's usually better. You can just find the address and email it, but they generally have a website where you can put in an email, you can attach a PDF of a letter, and that's more likely to get their attention. You can respond to email action alerts from an organization, and we'll see a quick example of that. Quite often, one organization will spearhead writing a letter and then ask other organizations to sign on. One thing that's important to keep in mind is if you are representing CAC, you need to be aware of the chain. For example, if it's a position letter, a sign-on letter, it's Janet as the CEO who has the authority to do that. So you can send the letter to her and then she will send it on. If after consulting with folks, cleaning up the language, Janet's really good at cleaning up the language, both for just English grammar and for the political implications of sometimes even specific wording can have a meaning that you didn't intend. So that all goes to Janet. So you can't just on your own fire off an email and say, I'm representing Climate Action California. You want it to go through your committee, your team, and then ultimately through Janet. So we'll look at some specific examples of these. Next slide. So action alerts, basically it's organizations. This is an action alert from CAC, for example. It basically says, look, here's this bill coming up. We need to send lots of messages, emails to the legislator or these key committee members or this committee chair, and gives you information about what typically in this message, it gives an idea of these are the points you may want to include in your message. This is where you send it. So an email alert comes from the organization, but it's going out to the members to individually email or contact the legislator, which gives them an idea, the legislator an idea of the level of support or opposition. Next slide. Position letters are more formal. Position letters are from the organization directly to a legislator or members of the committee, and they indicate support or opposition for a particular position. So this is a position letter I drafted last year that Janet then cleaned up and then signed. Next slide. So just to notice a couple of key points in a position letter. Typically, there's a header that says support or oppose the bill. It makes it clear what your position is right from the top. You specify the bill, the author, legislative author in parentheses, and then the topic of the bill. And that's information you can find on LegInfo. That title is on LegInfo as part of the bill information. And primary positions are support and oppose. Those are the clearer ones. There's also support if amended, which means we basically support this, but we'd like to see these changes made. Or oppose unless amended, which means we're going to oppose this unless these particular changes are made. So you've got a headliner which indicates that if the bill's been amended, you will say as amended on such and such a date to make it clear which version of the bill you're talking about. Then you have an intro paragraph which sort of talks about the group. It basically says, you know, we've got this number of supporters and we support or oppose this particular piece of legislation. Then you briefly state your rationale for support or opposition. And then finally, a closing paragraph, which says, are we urging aye or nay, or are we supporting if amended? What's just reiterating our position. And questions? I'm sorry. Ex-teacher, I'm still used to that. Okay, next slide. In terms of position letters, again, I would refer back to Adam's presentation last time on LegInfo. LegInfo, you can find out the status of the bill, what committees it has been assigned to, what the history was at previous committees, and basically all the information you need about the bill you can find on LegInfo. That's also where you submit a position letter. Again, you don't submit that letter until it's been vetted through the whole process. Janet has signed it, and then you can submit it. And I think Adam went through in the first meeting the details of doing that, going through that process. Next slide. Okay, so that's written. Verbal is me toos, and this is one of the important tasks that our committee teams are going to be needing to do, is delivering me toos. And it may sound a little imposing, you're going to be testifying before a committee, but it is really short and simple. This is in person. You go to the committee hearing. Typically, the legislator who introduced the legislation will talk about the bill. They will have some groups, and it normally wouldn't be us unless this happens to be one of the bills where we're a primary sponsor. They will ask folks to come and make statements in support, typically a couple of minutes. After there have been support, then there will be any formal statements of opposition. Again, just one or two groups that in discussion among themselves have decided who's going to speak a little bit longer. The Me Toos are really simple. After the support and opposition, they ask folks to come to the mic, and all you say is your name, your organization, and whether you support or oppose. And you can say support if amended or oppose unless amended. That's about all you're allowed to say. Some chairs are a little bit more lenient. Sometimes you can say support if amended to remove funding for road widening, something like that. But anything more than a sentence in the chair is probably going to cut you off. You can also include other organizations. So you might say, my name on behalf of Climate Action California, and also on behalf of, and then list the other organizations that have asked you. So if there's organizations they can't have someone in Sacramento, they can ask someone who will be there to give Me Too's. So you can list the names of the organizations, but that's pretty much it. And then you say, you know, in opposition, in support, support if amended, and so on. So that's it for the Me Too's, but they are very powerful. It's important for the committee to see and look at the faces of people who are supporting and opposing the legislation. Next slide. We used to be able to do, and Kathy alluded to this, we used to be able to do remote Me Too's, where you could call in typically via Zoom, and you could do a Me Too over the phone. During COVID, this was allowed for most committees. Currently, last year, the rules were changed so that right now, Senate and Assembly committees do not allow remote Me Too's, and testimony must be in person. This seems unfortunate because there are a lot of folks who just, it's a small organization, maybe it's a small organization based in Southern California or the Central Valley, and they can't send somebody up to Sacramento. And so then they're deprived of the opportunity of providing a Me Too unless they can piggyback on somebody else's Me Too who's gone to Sacramento. And so, and it is better if you can be in person. Again, one of the reasons we want to do this, if they're seeing your face, if they're looking you in the eye, if it's somebody that they've had a relationship with, your Me Too is going to be much more effective. Oh, that's so-and-so, I know them, we had a meeting with them. That's much more effective than a voice over the phone. But we still ought to be able to participate even if you're not physically present in Sacramento. Next slide, please. So we do have a petition that's going. We have been trying this, and frankly, it's not gotten a lot of traction, but we're just going to keep pushing on this. If you have not already signed the petition, if you've signed, we've got you're on record. If you have not yet signed the petition, we do have a petition to restore phone-in Me Too's for the hearings, because it shouldn't matter whether you can travel or not. Next slide, please. Okay, floor alerts. This is another form of written communication. This comes later. We talked about how the legislation goes through the committees. It'll go through the first house. If it passes through the committees on the first house, it goes to the floor on that house. So this is when it comes to the floor for a vote of the full legislative body, the Senate or the Assembly. And there's a floor vote when it goes through the first house. If it passes, then it goes to the second house, and you have a floor vote again. If it gets amended in the second house, it's got to go back to the first house for yet more discussion. But when it comes to either house for a full floor vote, you can send a floor alert. Typically, it goes out to legislators and or their legislative aides. It's especially good with people that you have a particular relationship with. And these are short. They can be individual or what we call a NASCAR letter from multiple organizations. Next slide, please. So this is, you can see why we call it a NASCAR letter. You typically include the logos of all the organizations, so it starts looking like those NASCARs at Indy 500 or other races with all the sponsors' logos all over it. Next slide. So that's at the top, and this is just an example of a NASCAR letter. They've got big letters, floor alert, and whether your position is support or oppose. We've got typically just a few points. It's good to keep it to a minimum because these are legislators going into a floor session where they're going to have a lot of bills to consider. So you do want to kind of hit them with a number of organizations that are supporting this position, whether you support or oppose, and then at the bottom, vote aye or vote no if you oppose. And then on the backside, this was a PDF as a single sheeter on the backside. It specifically lists the organizations whose logos are on the front. So this is kind of a sort of last ditch, but it's basically for legislators that have not been involved. It gives ammunition to folks who are on the committees that you have been talking to and the sponsoring legislators. And it lets legislators who have not been involved in the discussion get a sense of the support or opposition. So that's just another form of written communication that you can use. And with that, I think it's time to close up and turn it open for questions, if I'm not mistaken. Next slide. Yeah. All right. So thanks. At this point, we'll open up for questions and answers to anybody on the panel.
And
And Jen, do you have any closing remarks before?
no, I just want to thank Jonathan and Kathy and Mary. This is terrific. And there's lots of ways that you can sign up to be part of what we've been talking about. And I think those links are in the chat and we'll send them around later. But we definitely want to hear your questions. But I just want to say that you can't imagine the work that Kathy Schaeffer has been doing, putting these meetings together over the last few weeks. I mean, maybe she's trying to distract herself from the fact that her house is right in practically in the line of fire, but it's just been fabulous. We have meetings with all sorts of people we've never met with before, and everyone is welcome to join. The meetings have been really well organized and constructive, and we're making friends with some really important legislators and their staff, and there are a lot of new legislators this year that we want to meet. Some of them we supported with our PAC over the election. So I can't encourage everyone enough to join those meetings. And if you sign up on our volunteer form and click the box that says that you want to join district meetings, we'll send you invitations to all of them, and they're still rolling out. It's really been fabulous. And Kathy has just done a phenomenal job of getting meetings with really great people. So with that, and hope that things in Los Angeles are going to start looking better soon. We'll take your questions.
I think we have some hands raised.
Hands up, yeah. Maureen.
Thank you for taking my questions. Maureen Forney, San Francisco Bay Area, Third Act. First of all the love that we can muster is sent to our brothers and sisters in Southern California. My question's about the Zoom links. When I've lobbied with DC, some members of Congress want to make sure that we use a team link, and because it's secure. Are we getting the links when we're talking to the LA from the office, or are we providing the links? Or does that depend on the legislator? That's question one.
That's a good question. No. It's yeah.
Well, it's kind of surprising, but most of the time, until recently, the offices have been asking us to provide the links. And I don't know whether this is because the legislature is disorganized and they don't pass out Zoom links to their people. What? But
It's the same in DC. That's why I ask.
yeah, it's rather odd, but yeah, I mean, the one time that we had a meeting with Anna Eshoo and she wanted to provide the link, and she did, but it turned out the link couldn't accommodate as many people as we had waiting to talk to her, and it was a complete mess. What can I say? I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess the answer is we have to make sure that that's clear before we go into it.
Well, I mean, normally you're having a back and forth with the scheduler or the ledge director, whoever you're going to talk to. And in the course of that, if they don't say, usually they will say, can you provide a Zoom link? But if they don't, we should definitely clarify.
Okay. Yeah. All right. It sounds like more of the same. And then the second question is, we intend to discuss this at not only our coordinating committee meeting on Monday, but our general meeting at the end of the month. And in my mind's eye, I see us recruiting from our general membership to engage in this. And so I just wanted to raise a flag that at the end of the month, you may have a burst of people if we're able to get our dreams to come true. And thank you for your time.
That would be great. So Jeff Perron. Is that, I can't see.
It's Faramaz is next.
Oh, okay, Faramaz.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. I was just wondering, since we're going to be gathering people for the specific legislative committees, when do you all anticipate having those groups meeting up, like the transportation team, the natural resources team, et cetera?
You know, it's hard to be specific. You're talking about the teams within Climate Action California? Or are you talking about the
Yes.
teams following the committees?
No, I mean CAC's internal teams that are tracking the committees.
Just to be clear, we organize a lot of volunteers based on specific legislative topics or focuses. And that list is also in the volunteer form that you'll see if you're signing up for district meetings. And the meetings they'll probably get, some of them have been meeting already, trying to cook up some ideas for the sorts of legislation we want to see introduced this year, but most of them will probably get going after legislation has been introduced, and when the teams will be looking at the kinds of issues that we want to support. And if something else comes up in the meantime, anyone on any one of those teams each one of them has a Google group. You can write to the Google group and suggest a meeting. I mean, it's pretty fluid. Hopefully it's logical. So
Next is Monica. Monica?
Yes. My question is, I'm willing to be a face in the meeting, but how do I get notification of the meeting, when and where and how to sign in?
So go to the volunteer form, and there's a box on there that you can check that says that you want to participate in district meetings. And so when we are inviting people to a meeting, we invite all of the constituents that we have on our list in that person's district, and the folks who have said that they want to participate in district meetings. So when you sign up for that, we'll get you into this list, and then you'll hear about the meetings.
And then how do we get third act on your NASCAR page?
And when we're putting together a NASCAR letter, we normally reach out to all sorts of allies and groups. And we also have a coalition that you can sign up for, listed on our website. And when Third Act signs up there, then we'll notify you when we have one of those letters. Are you talking about the Third Act in general, or one of the 3 Third Act chapters?
Well, I can only speak for the Southern California chapter, but I mean, it isn't out of the question to get it where our Sacramento chapter and our Bay Area chapter would join as well. So then we could just be Third Act California.
That would really be wonderful.
May I tell Monica something? This is Maureen from NorCal. I wrote to Deborah Moore, and I'm waiting for an answer about that very same thing.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Thanks. So Jeff is next, I think.
Hi. Yeah, and just an aside, I asked if people could be able to go on video while they're asking questions, and it was on and then got turned off. So I don't know why that policy is. Anyway, I have three quick questions. First one is in terms of figuring out the best way to approach legislators, I was wondering what you think of using ChatGPT to get a good summary of a legislator's interests and likely persuasive arguments on an issue. Seems like that might be something that you could get from that. I'll say the other two quickly. What's the relative value of signing on to a group letter versus a bunch of people sending individual letters, or just do both? And the last one is, why are the politicians opposed to remote Me Too's, and how can we most effectively advocate for this?
Those are great questions, Jeff. Okay, so ChatGPT, I need training. So speak to me after we figure more of this out. Or
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I haven't had time to figure it out yet. But it's certainly possible. And we do have people who are taking notes at meetings and generating notes through AI, which are quite good. There's probably a good way to do this. And but maybe you can educate us. That would be good.
I would just add that I think ChatGPT could be very useful, but I would be cautious about using it as a single source. You'd want to verify information, especially anything that seems surprising or inconsistent with what you know, because the last thing we want to do is go and meet with a legislator and say, "Oh, you're interested in such and such," and have them say, "What?"
Okay.
Thank you, Jonathan. The relative value. So I think that when, there are a couple of ways that we do a group appeal. We can start something called a petition in Action Network, which is our database tool for these kinds of communications. And we can take names, as you saw on the letter that Jonathan showed. In addition to the names on that petition, we had thousands of names of organizations on that petition. We had thousands of individuals who had signed on. I think that is better than having somebody's email box filled up with hundreds of identical messages. I think that just makes them mad. One of the things that we've been trying that I think works a little bit better is, instead of giving people a prescribed message, is to give them some talking points and say, your job here is to fill out this form with your own views on these talking points we've given you, and use this form to send it in. And I think that probably works better, but it's a little bit more work for the people who want to make their point. But yeah, I'm not in favor of a whole lot of people sending the same message. And why is the legislature resistant to remote participation? Well,
It's the $1 million question.
at least, yeah. I mean, there have been a couple of instances where hundreds of people have shown up to comment. And I guess they don't want to have that happen to them again. But honestly, isn't that why we're paying them? To listen to us? So I don't know. We've just got to keep pushing on this. And so please, I think that Alex has put a link to our petition in the chat, and we're compiling a list. We've got, 1,800 names on it so far. We need more. And we're also reaching back out to organizations to get them to support this. But I think with the terrible situation in Los Angeles, it's actually more important than ever, because you can't expect those people to all traipse up to Sacramento when they're just trying to figure out where to sleep. And the decisions that are going to be made have a tremendous impact on their lives.
Thanks.
I think, is Will next? I think so. Go, Will.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to underscore something that Janet said, excuse me, in response to a good question from farmers about these new teams we're forming and how they're going to function. We didn't really talk about the pre-existing subject matter teams much today, but CAC has always had, I guess we call them committees or teams, but subject matter teams that meet by Zoom on energy. There's one on building decarbonization, one on plastics, one on agricultural methane, one on transportation. I think there are a couple others. Those are kind of meaty policy discussions. They're really interesting because CAC has a very deep bench with some real expertise and people who gravitate to the committees that interest them. And it's something you can do and probably should do if you click on one of these links today to sign up. I want to be on the team that goes to Sacramento to do things on transportation. You should also be joining the transportation team that meets, well, I don't know if it's every other week or what their frequency is. And they talk about, well, what are the bills of the 2000 that we really should be caring about this year? And what does this one mean? Is it actually good or bad? It's not always clear right away. So those are really interesting discussions. And if you're participating or even just listening in on those, you'll be in a much better position to come to Sacramento to meet with people in person. So that's something people can do, even if you are not, you don't picture yourself driving to Sacramento on any regular basis. The thing that's new, these special teams focused on one committee at the Capitol, addresses two problems that we really haven't been strong on in the past. One is with the inability to phone in or Zoom in to committee hearings, we want to be better organized so that we have somebody designated who can attend, and better yet, attend and speak for, our 10 other allied groups who have the same problems we do, getting somebody to drive to Sacramento. The other thing it does, which is what we spent a lot of time discussing today, is it really triples our impact, because it's one thing to send a letter and to stand up and say, we support this at the committee hearing. It's a whole nother better thing to go into a legislator's office. And even if you're talking with a staff member who handles that issue, or even if you're leaving a message with the receptionist, you've made a really big statement that you care enough to be there in person. You're willing to talk about the issues. Sometimes you get that chance in an unplanned way. And I don't need to tell everybody here. I mean, there's a face-to-face communication and you're remembered, and it's way more meaningful. So that's what we're hoping to build.
And I'd just like to add that you don't have to be in shouting distance of Sacramento in order to join one of these committee teams, because the other thing that we need to recruit are constituents of the committee members. And that's equally important, because we are going to definitely meet with the committee staff and the chair, but we also need to convince the committee members to vote with us on the bills that we're advocating for. And so these committee focused teams can include people who are not in Sacramento, and who will have an important role to play in making sure that all of the committee members are briefed by us as well as by the staff when it's time to vote. So can we go to Megan and then to Farmars, who already asked the question? Because I want to give everyone a chance. Megan?
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment about the long distance participation. I believe it's important that we have that. But in the past, the way they organized it a lot of times was to have two different phone lines, one of people who opposed a bill and one of people who support the bill. And the problem with that was that there was some abuse of that system. I've seen it happen twice where, you know, the opposing side would stack the supporting side with their members, and they would only allow 100 comments from each. And so then they'd be on the phone line taking up the space of people who wanted to say, I support it, but they are saying they oppose it. And the committee chair would say, you're on the wrong line, darling. You need to be on the other line, but I'll let you go ahead and say your piece. But that ends up being skewing it towards the people who are opposing it if they are calling in on the support line. So there was some abuse of the system. So I think they need to just have a solitary phone system instead of having two lines, because in the past I've seen that be inequitable. But I wish they would bring that back, because I think it's extremely important for people in Southern California, especially, to be able to talk to the legislatures and the committees. And so I'll pass on that.
No, it's definitely true. And it always occurs to me when that happens that, we're just not rude enough to jam up the other guy's line. But yeah. And so actually in the letter that we are sending to the leadership, we've suggested some alternatives that would still give people more of a voice. And, this is something I think that they're going to need to figure out. And surely the committee chairs are onto this game of some of the opposition to us jamming up the phone lines. Faramars, do you still have a question? Is that from before?
Hey, thank you for unmuting me. I wanted to follow up about the question about ChatGPT. In addition to the risk of potentially inaccurate results from ChatGPT, two other things to keep in mind. Number one, if you're using a free version of ChatGPT or Claude or any of those types of Gen AI systems, you're basically not going to have any privacy or control over not just the question that you asked, but also the fact that you were the one asking the question. Now, hopefully this isn't going to become an issue in the near term, but we know the fossil fuel companies have a lot of money on the line, and they have paid to infiltrate environmental groups. They can easily pay OpenAI to get data on who's asking queries about what. Now, ChatGPT does have a paid version where they say that your queries and your identity won't be sold to third parties and whatnot, but just be aware of that. And the second thing is Gen AI systems use tremendous amounts of energy and water. And so there are actually a lot of environmentalists who are kind of pushing back on rolling out Gen AI for everything and anything. So just be aware of that. I'm not saying don't use the tools, but some people might flag it and say, well, are you leaning on this as a crutch, or using it in the most efficient way? So just flagging that as well. But thank you. I think it's a creative idea.
Thanks. I think we have a lot to learn. And just, you know what this is? This is a fountain pen. Just, I guess I'm really old, but yeah. Unless there are any more questions, I think we will wrap this up. It's been terrific. And I just want to thank everybody for sticking with us to the bitter end. We will definitely send the video links around to both part 1 and part 2, and all of the other information that we have flagged today. So you'll have it. And we really hope people will join us and join this committee initiative, because I think it's a tremendously important year, and we need to be as strategic and on it as we possibly can. And with that, and prayers for our friends in Los Angeles. Thank you very much for coming.